Have you ever gotten an invoice? Not from a store, but from your own family? Mine was for $900. No greeting, no explanation. Just a PDF titled Graduation Cost Allocation, like I was their personal ATM. The truth no one talks about? Families can quietly turn you into their default financier, without permission, without gratitude. I'm Rachel, and I used to be the dependable one, silently paying for peace, until I decided enough was enough. In this video, I'll show you how I turned a financial guilt trip into freedom, dropping that invoice from $8,900 to $890, while setting clear boundaries that stuck. You'll learn how to slash 78% of emotional spending, set firm limits in just 7 days, and reclaim your place without guilt. Because I didn't just say no, I made it undeniable. And when my family sent back the full check with a silent apology, I knew I had finally been seen. Don't wait for your own invoice moment. If you've ever felt like the quiet one paying for everything, this video is for you. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. I thought it was a late congratulations email. The subject line had that stiff, formal tone my father preferred. Graduation cost allocation. My thumb hovered above the trackpad, heart already beating a little faster, not with excitement, but with something I couldn't name just yet. Rain tapped at the window like a metronome, steady and insistent. The gray light in my apartment turned everything dull. My oatmeal-colored couch, the stack of unopened mail, the lukewarm coffee going stale beside my laptop. Luna, my tabby, had curled herself into a cinnamon roll by the space heater, blissfully unaware that my day had just tilted off-center. I clicked the email. No greeting, no punctuation, just a link to a PDF. I opened it. $8,900. Breakdown. Catering for $60. $3,200. Photographer. Premium package. $1,100. Yacht rental. $2,800. Floral arrangements. Madison's favorites. $750. Custom signage. $350. Admin and coordination. $700. At the top, in bold, all caps font, graduation party, Madison Linwood, family contributions. My hand stilled over the keyboard. For a few seconds, I didn't breathe. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the heater and the occasional sigh of rain against the sill. I scrolled down, looking for a message, an explanation, a hi Rachel, or even hope you're well. Nothing. No context, no courtesy. Just a total, a due date, and the unspoken assumption that I, Rachel Linwood, the dependable daughter with a stable job and decent 401k, would cover it. Again. I reread the invoice 3 times before I reached for my phone. Jessie picked up halfway through the first ring. Rach, you okay? I didn't even bother with hello. They sent me an invoice for Madison's party. $8,900. Silence. Then a breath. Then, you're kidding. I wish I were. No note, no call, just this thing in my inbox like I'm an ATM with a Gmail account. Jessie swore under her breath. That's not a contribution, that's emotional extortion. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Jessie always called things what they were. No sugar, no filter. And get this, I added, they didn't even put me on the group text last week about planning. Again. Because you'd ask questions, she said dryly, and because they know you'll feel guilty enough to pay it anyway. I didn't answer. Guilt had been the currency of my relationship with my family for as long as I could remember. When I got into Stanford, they barely came to visit. When I landed my first job in Seattle, they told people I was off doing something with computers. When Madison got into art school, they threw her a backyard party with string lights and speeches and a chalkboard sign that said, "Our Star." Mark came in quietly from the hallway holding a grocery bag. He noticed the look on my face before I said anything. That was one of the things I loved about him. He didn't ask for the story before offering the blanket. He set the bag down, came around behind my chair, and wrapped his arms around me. "I got oat milk," he said gently, "and your cinnamon tea." I leaned back into him. "I got an invoice for Madison's party." He didn't say, "What?" or "You're kidding." He just asked, "Are you okay?" That question broke something in me, not dramatically, just a soft, slow cracking like ice thawing. "I don't know," I said. "It's not even about the money. It's the assumption that I'll just do it. Quietly." "You don't have to carry this alone," he said, and pressed a kiss to my temple. Later that evening, I pulled out an old photo album from the shelf, the one Mom had sent me after cleaning out the garage 2 years ago. Tucked between a blurred Christmas photo and a school field trip was a single picture from my college graduation. Me, alone on the porch steps, holding a card that just said, "Kay, congrats." No hugs, no banners, no yacht. I opened my laptop again and clicked reply on the email. "Dear Dad, I hope this was sent to me in error, as I wasn't aware of any prior discussion regarding contributions. Rachel." Short, polite, neutral. I hovered over send for a long second, then clicked. The reply came 2 hours later, not from my mother, not even with a phone call, just another email. "You're in a strong financial position. It's only fair to contribute." That was it. No signature, no thanks. Just that. Luna stretched and yawned as I stared at the glowing screen. I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, "This time, I won't just swallow it." And I meant it. There she was, beaming under fairy lights on a yacht. I wasn't even tagged in the group photo. It was nearly midnight when I saw it. Madison's graduation party, live-streamed from someone's phone. The screen glowed in my darkened living room, throwing golden flickers across the walls like it wanted to mock me. My phone buzzed with hearts and comments from mutuals I hadn't heard from since college. They were all watching it too. Champagne Tower, gold and white floral arches, a live jazz band. The hashtag read, "Madison Moments." I hadn't even been told the event had a theme. I sat curled on the couch, a blanket wrapped tight around me, Luna purring softly at my feet. My TV was off, but the sound of jazz drifted through my phone speakers, tinny and too cheerful. It wasn't just a party. It was a production. I hadn't been invited, not even a courtesy text. And yet, there was Mom in the background of one story, wearing pearl earrings and that pastel pink scarf she saves for special occasions. Dad was nodding to someone near the bar, holding a glass of what I could only assume was the same wine he once called too expensive for casual gatherings. Then came the kicker. A story panned across a white banner near the dessert table. In flowing gold script, it read, "Thank you, Rachel, for your support." The words were flanked by cupcakes. I blinked. The camera zoomed in as someone laughed behind the screen. Support? I hadn't even said yes. I never gave consent to pay for this. And yet, here I was, publicly thanked, like a silent donor at a gala I wasn't deemed worthy to attend. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. Jessie picked up on the second ring. "Are you kidding me right now?" she snapped, voice sharp with fury. "A yacht? A banner? Who does that?" I barely spoke. My mouth was dry. "They really outdid themselves," I murmured. "She looks happy." Jessie scoffed. "Of course she does. They handed her the world on a silver platter and sent you the invoice." On screen, Madison opened a velvet box. Inside was a gold bracelet. The inscription read, "Visionary." I stared at it a long time, remembering my own graduation day, a backyard cookout, one limp balloon, a printed card that read, "Kay, congrats." Not even my name. My thumb hovered over the email I had drafted to Dad, a simple, restrained line. Was this sent to me by mistake? But I didn't send it. I just stared at the blinking cursor until it felt like a question mark digging into my chest. I deleted the draft. Then I whispered into the quiet room, Not to Jessie, not to Luna, maybe not even to myself, but to the part of me that had finally stirred. They really don't see me at all. The screen dimmed as my phone slipped from my fingers. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, where a faint crack snaked across the drywall, one I'd meant to fix for months. It looked deeper now, maybe it always had been. Maybe I was just seeing things clearly for the first time. Madison's voice echoed in my head, recorded in a video someone had reposted. "This has been the best night of my life. I feel so seen, so supported. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Thank you, everyone. And a special thank you to my sister Rachel for, well, just being you." Laughter. Applause. The camera panned across a circle of champagne glasses raised in my name, spoken like a punchline. I reached for the photo album I kept tucked behind the bookshelf, one of the only things I took when I left home for good. I flipped to the page with my graduation picture. It was taken on our front porch, my cap slightly askew, holding the same card I still kept in a drawer. K, congrats. No smiley face, no warmth. Just the cold shorthand of someone who couldn't be bothered to write 6 letters. Back in the present, my phone buzzed again. A message from Mom. "Hope you're watching. Isn't it magical? Madison deserves it all." No question, no mention of me. Just an assumption that I was watching from the sidelines and that I'd stay there. But something in me cracked. Not loudly, not with fury. It was quieter than that. A slow, deliberate shift, like a door unlatching after being stuck for years. I didn't know what I would do yet, but I knew this. I would not pay for my own erasure. Later that night, as rain began to tap against the windows, I stood by the kitchen sink, staring out at the city lights. I could make out silhouettes behind other windows, strangers living their lives, eating dinner, laughing, unaware of the small griefs unfolding in rooms like mine. Luna jumped onto the counter, brushing against my elbow. I stroked her absent-mindedly. "I'm done pretending," I said aloud. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. In the distance, a thunderclap rolled low and long, like something vast waking up. I let the sound settle over me. Somewhere, inside the quiet rage and deeper sadness, a strange calm took hold. They may not see me, but that doesn't mean I'm invisible. And I was about to remind them of that. I didn't even flinch when the alert came through. Transfer failed. $8,900. The notification blinked against my phone screen like it needed me to feel something. Guilt, maybe, but all I felt was a calm I hadn't known I was capable of. Mark glanced over from the other side of the couch. "That it?" I nodded, setting the phone face down. They got their answer. The day had started differently. A thin June sun filtered through the clouds as I sat across from Dr. Reynolds, legs crossed tightly, hands folded so hard my knuckles ached. Her office smelled like lavender and worn leather, safe in a way I wasn't used to. "I know they crossed a line," I said, "but part of me still feels awful, like I'm being cruel." Dr. Reynolds tilted her head gently, pen resting on her open notebook. "Rachel, if someone sends you a bill for a party you weren't invited to, what would you call that?" I exhaled. "Insulting, manipulative." "Exactly. This isn't about being cruel, it's about being clear." There was silence between us, warm and intentional. Then she added, "They didn't invite you to be family, but they still sent the bill." That stuck, like a weight settling in the right place. Not crushing, just clarifying. That afternoon, I walked into the downtown branch of Columbia Bank with a manila folder in hand, the same branch where Dad first opened a joint account with me when I turned 18. "For emergencies," he'd said. "You'll be glad we did this one day." I wasn't. The teller directed me to a small office where a young woman with bright blue glasses greeted me. Her name tag read, Melissa, Account Specialist. "What can I help you with today?" she asked kindly. I pulled out the folder and placed it on her desk. "I need to revoke all shared access between myself and Douglas or Catherine Linwood. Credit cards, checking, savings. If my name's still on anything, I want it off. Immediately. Her brows rose slightly, but she nodded. Of course. We'll go through each record to confirm. It took nearly 45 minutes. Old accounts I hadn't touched in over a decade. A dormant credit line they'd apparently kept open for just-in-case moments, none of which I'd approved. Melissa handled it all professionally, printing confirmation after confirmation, sliding them toward me like sheets of closure. When we finished, I signed the final document and gathered the papers slowly. One more thing, I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out a crisp check, filled out meticulously for $8.90, and a short note on matching stationery. Adjusted based on what I was invited to. Best, Rachel. I sealed them in an envelope and requested certified mail with return receipt. Watching the clerk stamp and process, it gave me a strange sense of symmetry, like I was filing something away, permanently. That night, Mark lit a candle in the kitchen and poured us both chamomile tea without asking. He didn't say much, just played a soft instrumental playlist and sat beside me while I sifted through another manila folder, this one labeled Family Expenses. Years of receipts, tuition transfers, flights home, holiday gifts, some things with prices, others with costs that never made it onto a ledger. I paused over a line from 2018, Madison's summer in Paris. I'd covered her flights because Mom called it an artistic opportunity. I pulled the document free, folded it twice, and dropped it in the recycling bin. The folder was nearly empty now. I picked up a blank file, wrote a single word in permanent marker across the front: boundaries. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls. One voicemail from Mom was nearly incoherent through tears. How could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you, this is so hurtful, so unnecessary. Then one from Dad. This is not how family behaves. This is childish, Rachel. Vindictive. I listened to both twice, not out of indecision, but to make sure I'd heard what I needed to hear. Then I opened a new email draft. Subject line: no longer mine to carry. I attached both audio files and addressed it to Dr. Reynolds. Mark emerged from the bedroom, hair still mussed from sleep. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded. For the first time in a long time. Yeah. He crossed the room and pressed a gentle kiss to my temple. You don't owe anyone your peace. I closed my laptop, exhaled, and let the silence hold me. Outside, the rain had started again, light, steady, and uncaring. But inside, I'd finally turned a page. The train ride from Portland to Eugene felt longer than usual, though I knew it hadn't been. Something about the way the trees blurred past the window, about the quiet thrum beneath the seat. Everything around me moved, but inside, I was finally still. Aunt Celia greeted me at the station in her faded denim jacket and a wide-brimmed straw hat, like she'd walked out of another era. She didn't say anything at first, just opened her arms. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding myself until she pulled me in. Her house smelled like lavender and something cinnamon sweet. Records crackled softly from a player in the corner, Miles Davis floating in and out of the breeze that drifted through open windows. It was warm, lived in. The kind of home where nothing matched perfectly, but everything belonged. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said, as she poured steaming water over 2 mugs of chamomile tea. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. We settled into the backyard patio, the late June sun casting soft light across her rows of hydrangeas. The clink of spoon against ceramic was the only sound between us for a moment. You remind me of myself, Celia said gently. Back when I thought being quiet made me good. I blinked. What do you mean? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for a weathered leather journal from a shelf just inside the sliding door. You remember this? I nodded. She had given it to me when I was 9, with a single line written inside the cover. Write what they won't hear. I was the family scapegoat, Celia said, flipping through pages filled with slanted, inky lines. Blamed for being too independent, for not fitting the mold, for wanting something else. I left before I lost myself. I leaned forward. What made you leave? She smiled, but there was sadness in it. One day I realized the silence they expected from me wasn't peace, it was erasure. We talked for hours. About the family, about her life after leaving, about the patterns that never seemed to change. I told her everything, about the email, the yacht party, the check for $8.90. I'm so tired of explaining myself, I said finally. You don't have to, she replied. You were never meant to fund your own erasure. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Maybe it was the hum of the ceiling fan or the weight of a real quilt over me instead of the thin throw I kept back in Portland. Maybe it was because no one here expected anything from me. Not a smile, not a payment, not a role. In the morning, Celia made waffles, not frozen ones, but real batter poured into a creaky iron press. She hummed along to the jazz record still spinning in the living room. You always liked these, she said, sliding a plate toward me. I smiled. You were the only one who remembered. Celia sat down across from me with her own plate and a fresh cup of tea. Do you remember your 10th birthday? She asked. I nodded slowly. The one where the cake had Madison's name on it, too. You didn't say a word the whole afternoon, she said, but later I found pages from your notebook torn out and tucked behind the bookshelf. They were beautiful, sad but beautiful. I stared at the butter melting into syrup. I stopped writing after a while. It didn't seem to matter. It does, she said quietly, even if no one else reads it. Writing reminds us that our voice exists. After breakfast, we sat under the big maple tree in her yard. Celia pulled out another old journal, this one filled with lists, things she had let go of, things she refused to forget. One list was titled, Truths They Tried to Unteach Me. I asked if I could read one aloud. Of course, she said. They're yours now, too. I picked one at random. I am allowed to love without losing myself. Celia nodded. That one took me 20 years to believe. Later, in the guest room again, I picked up the new journal. The leather felt warm under my palms, like it had been waiting for me. I turned to the second page. Below the title, I began to write. They told me I was responsible. For peace, for harmony, for holding the cracks together with my silence. But I was only a child with a coloring book. I wasn't loud like Madison. I didn't tantrum or sparkle. I just tried to make things easier. And in return, they forgot I had a name. The pen didn't stop. Paragraph after paragraph poured out. I wrote about my first job, how I gave half my paycheck to help with house expenses, even when I lived in a dorm. I wrote about the time I chipped in for Madison's art supplies because Mom said, "You understand money better." I wrote about every moment they asked me to shrink. By the time the sun slid low in the sky, the page count had doubled, and I didn't feel empty. I felt stitched back together. When Celia peeked in later and saw me still writing, she just smiled. "Keep going," she said. "You're not invisible here." That night, before bed, I lit the lavender candle she kept on the windowsill and whispered a line to myself from one of her old pages. No one has to see you for you to matter, but it's okay to want to be seen. I left the journal open beside me, ink still drying. For the first time in my life, I wasn't writing to be heard. I was writing to remember, to reclaim, to return to myself. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I just needed the numbers to stop screaming in my head. It started with a receipt, then a bank statement, then another. I didn't realize how deep the pattern ran until I laid it all out in one place, line by line, year by year. The spreadsheet grew slowly like moss on a north-facing wall. Quiet, stubborn, impossible to ignore once you noticed it. I spread everything across my dining table. Receipts, tax forms, birthday ledgers. A pastel sticky note fluttered to the ground. Madison's name scribbled on it next to 2018 new MacBook 1299. I sat down with a mug of mint tea gone cold and began to color code. Green for her. Gray for me. Under car, her name appeared 3 times. Once for the down payment, once for registration, once for repairs. Mine? A single cell marked bus pass, reimbursed by job. Then came the birthdays. Her sweet 16 with a hotel ballroom and a chocolate fountain. My 16th? A grocery store cake at home with an oops, forgot the candles laugh from Mom. The difference wasn't just in numbers, it was in memory. By the time I finished, there was a $241's $672 difference between what they'd gifted her and what they'd expected from me. A number so clean, so mathematical, it made my chest tighten. Mark came over that night and stood behind me, arms crossed. "You're making sense of the mess," he said. "That's brave." I didn't feel brave. I felt like I'd just opened a vault filled with everything I'd tried to explain and had always been told was just my perspective. I remembered what Jessie once teased me. You budget feelings better than money. Now, for the first time, I was budgeting both. I wasn't letting guilt overdraw me anymore. I titled the spreadsheet, "What You Owe versus What You Gave." Then I wrote a blog post to match. It wasn't angry. It wasn't spiteful. It was precise. I wrote about the emotional labor of being the reliable daughter, the invisible sibling, the one who didn't need much and therefore didn't get much. I included screenshots. My graduation photo, alone on the porch, the invoice email, and a few lines from my father's reply. I ended with this. They said I was lucky, but luck doesn't ask you to carry everyone else's silence. Jessie was the first to comment. This should be required reading for every oldest daughter. Then others chimed in. A single mom in Ohio, a nurse from Vermont, a teacher who said she cried while making dinner. The post spread quietly but steadily through private forums, women's Facebook groups, Reddit threads. People didn't just comment. They wrote back with stories. Daughters, sons, cousins, even a few grandmothers. Someone created a thread called Financial Ghosts We Inherited. Someone else translated the blog into Spanish and shared it with a community of caretakers. A week later, I got an email from a small community workshop titled Boundaries and Balance. They wanted me to speak. Just 15 minutes, they said. Just share your story. I almost said no, but I didn't. Instead, I opened PowerPoint and built my first real slideshow. Slide 1 read, "Emotional labor isn't free." Slide 2, a bar graph. Her towered in green, mine a sliver in gray. Slide 3, the quiet tax. It listed emotional chores I had taken on over the years. Conflict buffer, family translator, the one who made sure birthdays were remembered even when mine wasn't. Beneath it, in smaller font, I wrote, "Silence is not peace. Silence is debt that keeps compounding." Mark helped me rehearse. We pushed the coffee table aside. I paced, barefoot, note cards in one hand, remote in the other. "You're holding your breath again," he said softly. I exhaled. "I just don't want to sound bitter." "You don't," he said. "You sound awake." The day of the workshop, the room smelled faintly of peppermint oil and printer ink. There were maybe 20 women seated in a semicircle, notebooks open, some already nodding before I said a word. When I showed the final bar graph, one woman covered her mouth. Another whispered, "I'm going through this right now." Afterward, they lined up. Some hugged me, some cried. A retired teacher told me, "You gave me the math I needed to forgive myself." A young mother clutched my hand and said, "I thought I was crazy. Now I think I'm just exhausted." A woman in her 60s handed me a folded piece of paper. It was her own version of a spreadsheet, just 2 columns, handwritten. One read, "Years given." The other, "Thanks received." I walked home with a tote bag full of affirmation cards, handwritten notes, and one yellow rose a participant had picked from her garden. Back at my apartment, I placed it in a jar by the window where the light hit just right. Later that evening, I reopened Madison's email. Subject, "Can we talk?" Just us. I didn't reply, not yet, but I didn't delete it either. Instead, I opened a new document and typed a single line. "This story doesn't end with them understanding me. It begins with me understanding myself." The envelope was thick, heavier than it should have been for something so silent. No return address, no handwriting, just my name typed out in the same cold font I'd seen on 1,000 invoices. It arrived 3 days before the workshop, dropped through my mail slot like a forgotten memory or a test. Inside, a check, $900. The exact number from the party invoice. Folded around it, a plain slip of paper with only one line. We're sorry in our way. No signature, no explanation, just the money, like it could erase what had already been written in silence. I sat with it on the kitchen table, sun streaking across the surface where I used to eat in the dark. Luna hopped up beside me, tail flicking once before settling into a purr. The apartment felt different now, plants thriving in corners I used to ignore, windows open, air moving freely. I'd painted the wall behind the bookshelf a soft teal just because I could. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at the check like it might explain itself if I waited long enough. My fingers hovered over my phone, tempted to text Madison. She had messaged a week earlier. I didn't know, I'm sorry. Can we talk? I hadn't answered then, and now, with this check in hand, I still wasn't sure if I should. Instead, I walked to my desk, slipped the check into a cheap black frame, and pinned it to the corkboard beside a yellow sticky note that simply read, "Boundaries are not revenge." The workshop hall was modest, a rented space above a bakery downtown with folding chairs, a projector, and the smell of cinnamon lingering faintly in the air. Women filtered in slowly, some in pairs, others alone, each carrying notebooks, thermoses, or just the weight of something unspoken. Jessie stood by the back wall, arms crossed, beaming. "You're really doing this," she whispered as she hugged me. "You turned all that grief into something real." I nodded, not out of pride, but out of something steadier, resolve. When it was time, I stepped forward. My slides glowed behind me, but I didn't start with numbers. "I used to think being the reliable one meant being the quiet one," I said. "I thought peace came from not upsetting people, from paying my part, even when I wasn't asked, just expected." Heads nodded. A few pens moved. Someone wiped a tear. One woman sat upright with her arms tightly folded, but her eyes shimmered. I wasn't trying to make a statement when I sent back $890. I just needed to stop the screaming in my own head. I needed a number that matched what I was actually invited to. I told them the rest, about the journal from Aunt Celia, the color-coded spreadsheet, the night I chose silence over sobs, and the email that wasn't congratulations but a price tag in disguise. The projector flicked through each slide like truth laid bare, gifts in green, voids in gray, time given, value erased. It wasn't a story of cruelty. It was a story of patterns and what happens when you finally stop participating in your own erasure. When I ended, I looked across the room. There weren't any standing ovations, just something better. Stillness. The kind that comes when people hear something that echoes. Afterward, a woman in her 60s came up and said, "I wish I'd learned this at your age." She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "Don't stop." Another woman waited until everyone else had gone. She wore a cardigan covered in cat hair and clutched her notebook like armor. "I've never spoken up at home," she said, "but I think I will tonight." Jessie pulled me into a long hug. This is what you were meant for," she said. "This is your voice now." Back home, I made tea. The check stayed on the wall. I didn't need to cash it. I had already gained more. Later that night, I added a new sticky note under the framed check. It read, "Next Workshop, Seattle." This time, I wasn't waiting for permission. I was giving myself the invite. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like more than enough. I didn't deposit the check. I framed it, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder, I am no longer for sale by silence. Sometimes family doesn't need to be fought. They need to be walked away from, with grace. And sometimes healing begins not when they say sorry, but when we stop needing them to. In life, boundaries aren't walls. They're doors we choose to close for peace. If this story brought something up in you, a memory, a quiet ache, or a small victory, I'd be honored to hear it. Your voice matters too.